Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for being here and on time. We really appreciate your attendance and participation in today's roundtable. For those of you who don't know, my name is Maybelline Rodriguez Laureano, and I am the Executive Director for South Florida Community Development Coalition. Many people know me as May. And we're very excited to have and host for you all our inaugural Resiliency Roundtable, Policy Roundtable that is, for the second quarter. Many of you may have participated in our previous roundtables. We held a housing roundtable back in April, as well as an economic roundtable earlier in June, if I'm not mistaken, the first week of June. And so now we're rounding it out with resiliency. And we have a dynamic lineup of speakers for us today. So we're eager to get started and jump into it. But before we do, as always is our custom, we would love for you all to utilize the chat feature to introduce yourself, what organization you represent or are affiliated with, if that is applicable, and what part of South Florida you are joining us from, since this is a virtual convening. So again, my name is May, and pleasure to facilitate and host this space for us. And with me, I have our wonderful engagement director, whom I'll pass it over to so he can introduce himself. Sam?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. It's good to see so many familiar faces and so many new faces as well. My name is Sam Diller. I'm the engagement director with the South Florida Community Development Coalition. And I will be co-hosting with May, and also making sure I don't leave anyone wait in the waiting room for too long. Yeah, let's see. So we do, as May said, have just a wonderful slate of presenters. Really appreciate all of you who agreed to join as a presenter. In terms of the schedule, May, did we drop that link in for the run of show?
No, I'll go over that shortly if you want to cover membership.
Sure. I'm glad to see so many of you that are online are members, but I'm going to drop a link in the chat where you can click on that, and it is a online application and enrollment process. So for those of you who have not yet joined, there's the link. And it is, I will say that the membership dues are really reasonable to begin with. They are for the calendar year 2022. And since we're we're nearly close to halfway through the calendar year, this membership does go to January 14th, 2023. The dues are about half of what they would be if you would join at the beginning of the year. So if you haven't joined already, save that link, click on it now, keep that open in your screen, and please join.
Thanks.
Real quickly, one last thing on these roundtables, as May mentioned, we did have our housing roundtable in May, and then an economic development roundtable in early June, and now the resiliency roundtable. These initial roundtables are open to all of our friends and allies as well as members, but as we move forward, we really want to look at the convening for later in the year would be for members only. So again, look at that link. May, back to you.
Thanks so much, Sam. Really appreciate it. He will be monitoring the chat throughout the roundtable. In the earlier section, we will have presentations. I'll share the program momentarily and walk through that before we pass it over to our first speaker. But again, please feel free to be interactive. We really hope that this space is engaging and dynamic for you all. We know that it's a lot to ask 2 hours of your time on a work day, but hopefully not only will you learn some great information, but you'll be able to share some really neat ideas on how we can tackle resiliency as a community, particularly from a policy advocacy front. So we really encourage your engagement. We will have Q&A sections in between our speakers, but again, the chat is always there for your accessibility. So again, thank you all for joining us for today's roundtable event. We're starting here with our opening remarks, which we will pass over just momentarily to our speakers, who will be sharing a little bit from a more of a wider statewide lens on some programs and some policies that they have been tackling, both at Enterprise Community Partners as well as Catalyst Miami, who also is engaged in leading in the Miami Climate Alliance front. And then we will shift gears into local priorities, where we'll have some representation both from nonprofits as well as some governmental public partners as well, including Jim from the Office of Resilience, Mark from Transit Alliance Miami, excuse the typo there. And then Megan will round us out with an introduction to a new tool that the Office of Community and Civic Engagement has been working on, and that we are proud to partner with to help elevate and platform for use. So really looking forward to diving into that. And then of course, we're eager to dive into around the 4 o'clock mark, where we'll explore and review more interactive space of ideas and solutions that you all bring to the table. The thing that I'm most curious about as a coalition is how we can better address the gaps in our ecosystem. I think many of us who are represented here on the call today are pretty well connected and aware of many of the different programs and things that are happening from a resilience perspective, since climate action is such a big issue for us here in South Florida. However, as in all ecosystems, there are always opportunities for us to better integrate and address the intersections of the different projects that we're looking to advance for the benefit of the community. And so hopefully we can dive into some of that through our discussion. And then we will be wrapping up the convening and hopefully addressing some actual items, if any emerge through our conversation. We'll have a space if there's any announcement for partners to share, and we will round it out. I will say we don't anticipate going all the way to the 5:30 mark. Some of our speakers that we originally had slated, unfortunately, were not able to join us, but they send their warm regards. So we may end up wrapping up sooner, and I'm happy to give that time back to you all. You may have seen on the RSVP, we also included this exploratory recap. Now, these are different topic areas across community development that we have heard about or have seen our partners focused on. And so just wanted to kind of provide a short list of different things we've been exploring as a coalition to kind of target and narrow down any priorities that emerge across or in between these focal areas. So more conversation to come on that after our speakers. So without further ado, I will get ready to pass it over to one of our good friends and longtime supporters at the Enterprise Community Partners. Many of you know her, Sarah. I will allow her to introduce herself, and I've made you co-host, so you should be able to share your presentation as well.
Indeed.
Thanks.
Great. Thanks, May and Sam. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Hello, everybody. And as I noted in the chat, so I am in Atlanta, but super excited. I'm actually coming to Miami on Wednesday for the first time in 2.5 years. So it's time. Really excited to be here today to talk to you guys about a program that we actually first launched in Miami a 1.5 years ago and have now expanded to other parts of the state, Keep Safe Florida. And tell you a bit about what we're doing and hopefully how you can help us get the word out to affordable multifamily owners and operators across South Florida. So I am with Enterprise Community Partners. We are a national affordable housing nonprofit. Our mission is to make home and community places of pride, power, and belonging. We do this through 3 pillars of work. We focus on increasing housing supply, building resilience and upward mobility, and then undergirding all of our work, advancing racial equity. As we think about our resilience work, we approach this in 3 areas. So education and motivation. So for example, we have a resilience academy that was in the Southeast last year. It's now on the Gulf Coast, and we'll go other parts of the country from there. assessing, adapting, and mitigating. So the Keep Safe Florida program we're going to talk about today focuses on mitigation of risk in terms of climate change and disasters, hurricanes, and then accelerating, recovering, and rebuilding. Enterprise has a pilot effort, not in the Southeast right now, but hopefully it will work, and we'll come to the Southeast beyond, and actually a disaster accelerator bridge funding tool to bridge federal funding in the when disasters happen. So focus on assessment and mitigation. Again, Keep Safe Florida is a comprehensive technical support system created to help affordable multifamily owners across Florida assess and address threats to their buildings and operations from climate change and natural disasters. And I'll pop this link into the chat after I finish. Folks can check it out. Really grateful to the Truist Financial Corporation for their support through the Truist Charitable Fund. Without them, this work wouldn't happen. We're able to provide all of these programs free of charge because of our philanthropic support. And we're also doing all of this work in partnership. So we're working with the City of Miami, of course, who was our founding partner with us last year, City of Orlando, the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, Florida Housing Coalition, and then our technical partner, the Institute for Building Technology and Safety. And one note is that Keep Safe Florida is actually now available throughout the state. So we started off in just Miami-Dade County. We now are also including Broward County and Palm Beach County, the Tampa MSA, and the Orlando MSA. So if folks have connections to owners and operators, throughout the state, would love to connect with them, make sure they're aware of the program. So Keep Safe Florida is focused on addressing threats and hazards associated with wind, water, health, extreme heat, and helping folks understand what those potential risks are, and then actually to develop a plan to address those vulnerabilities through maintenance, targeted strengthening, or full rehab or recapitalization. The program is right now targeting affordable multifamily properties. For us, that is 4 or more units, 80% AMI or below, but this could be anything from a small property that's owned by an individual to the more traditional large affordable housing we think of like a tax credit property. We are currently in our first cohort. We'll have our second cohort starting in August, which we're recruiting for now. And folks can either do a self-service track where they kind of go it themselves and use guides, but really are able to facilitate the assessments themselves, or they can join a learning collaborative, receive technical assistance from experts in the field, as well as access to training and the opportunity to connect with their peers. Again, I'll pop this link into the chat. And I'm going to actually stop share and then reshare because I have a video and I forgot to click the sound button. So hold on, folks. I learned that. There we go. So just a quick video that highlights the program.
Thanks to the support of the Truist Charitable Fund, a
We're
donor.
not seeing the videos here. We're seeing a Word document.
Advised by Truist.
Oh.
Enterprise community.
All right, hold on, folks. I'm going to stop share again. Share sound. All right, how about now?
Community partners, the City of Miami, the City of Orlando, Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, the Florida Housing Coalition, and IBTS have developed Keep Safe Florida to equip affordable multifamily property developers, owners, and operators with tools to assess their buildings' resilience to climate change and natural disasters, and provide them with actionable strategies and funding guidance to address these vulnerabilities. Enterprise has partnered with the Institute for Building Technology and Safety to provide an easy-to-use, robust online interface for users to access the Keep Safe Florida Building Protect with BitQM tool. Building Protect with BitQM incorporates hazards data typical to the region, allowing users to easily and confidently perform property-specific resilience audits. First, use Portfolio Protect on your suite of buildings to determine which ones to focus on. Second, register for the Building Protect program to get access to the Building Protect tool via the BitQM platform and complete the building assessment. Finally, receive a report with mitigation strategies to build your property's resilience. Upon logging in to Building Protect with BitQM, your building records are already available and ready for you to begin the assessments. Open the intake dashboard and start answering questions. Once all questions are complete, simply submit your form for review. Your report will come back with highlighted risks, recommended strategies, and guidance for improving the building's resilience. It is accessible on any tablet or computer, allowing you to use it where and when you need it. It safely and confidentially stores all your project information in one place, including forms, results, and recommendations. Information can be readily organized according to each individual user's needs. You can manage multiple properties that are known as projects, and information related to each project can be stored and maintained among a variety of users. Guidance strategies are informative rather than prescriptive, allowing the users to develop solutions that are appropriate for them. Once you've completed the form, it will be submitted for review by IBTS for accuracy and completeness. Share information such as reports, pictures, and plans with colleagues and other stakeholders. With the report at hand, you're ready to start the most important phase, rehabilitating your building to protect it and keep residents safe. Building Protect with VicQM is available to registered Keep Safe Florida users. Apply for Keep Safe Florida to help keep Florida safe for generations to come.
All right, there we go. You still see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, great. Make sure my sharing is still working. So I'll just give a quick overview of the specific tools. I don't want to take too much time to go, but happy also to follow up with folks after. The first tool that is actually available to anyone right now is called Portfolio Protect. This allows you to look at one or multiple addresses at once. It is looking at data sources based on where that property sits physically. And it enables you to then prioritize properties within a portfolio that you might want to dig into at the building level. It uses a variety of data sources and actually has just been updated to add in additional risk data. So if you go in, you enter your address and then click View Results, you're then going to get some more granular details about the hazards and risks. It is a national tool, so you're going to see things like earthquakes or fire, which is less applicable in Florida, but you're also going to see things around flooding and hurricane risk as well. And you can select these and get additional detail about that risk factor, what it means, and where you can get additional information. Our Building Protect tool, which was just mentioned in the video, is focused on hazards associated with climate change and hurricanes. And so we had an advisory body that was part of Keep Safe Miami that helped us identify those risks, which are really critical for South Florida. So extreme heat, extreme wind, storm surge, sea level rise, rain and river, things that you all know and deal with often. We also did include aspects of healthy housing as well in this assessment. It's an online tool, password protected. Multifamily owners and operators have their own login. They then complete an assessment online, which is self-guided, but again, we do have consultant support to help people with completing that. And then they get a report. So this is a PDF report, which will provide them with details of the vulnerabilities identified and recommendations around actions they might take. In addition, it's going to provide them with information on criticality, cost, and difficulty. So some of these things are more maintenance level, right? You can incorporate those into day-to-day. And some things are going to be more complicated and expensive. And then we do also link to some resources the enterprise has developed, which I'll touch on in a moment, but these are online tools outlining strategies and actions one can take. A big thing we learned, I think, with round one is that the assessment is one piece, obviously, but we really want to provide folks with more support in the what now. I have this report, what do I do? And so we do have consultants engaged to provide support to owners in developing that action plan and thinking through what to do next. And the other thing I'll just highlight with that, May, since you really talked about policy and advocacy, a big challenge with this program is that there aren't a lot of capital resources out there specifically towards mitigation for affordable multifamily housing. A lot of these projects really need grant or subsidy dollars to make this work. It's difficult for them to take on debt for these activities. One thing I will highlight is that the city of Miami still does have some CDBG funds, which they set aside for properties from 4 to 20 units that have gone through the Keep Safe Florida tool, and that is forgivable, a forgivable resource. So it's coming in as technically debt, but at no cost, and it is forgivable with maintenance of affordability. So that is very exciting. That is not something we have everywhere, but is something that really want to focus on that need for concessionary capital, really, to make this work. This is one of the tools that is actually now available at the URL climatesafehousing.org. It's an online tool, which is our Strategies for Multifamily Resilience Manual. It's interactive online. It's developed with resilience experts from around the country and includes operations and maintenance guidance, cost estimates, case studies, and more to guide owners and operators in making investments in the protection of their buildings and residents. In addition, folks that participate in the program go through the business continuity training and have access to our business continuity toolkit, which is focused on ensuring continuity of operations in the event of a disaster. So just a quick case study I want to highlight. Miami-Dade County did engage with us with the Keep Safe Miami program, and they assessed 14 of their county-owned affordable properties. This was a partnership between the Office of Resilience and the Public Housing and Community Development team. We worked with them to provide some additional webinars and support to complete those assessments. They've then been able to use those in 2 different grant applications to secure funds, both for actually hardening one of the buildings directly, as well as another grant application that will enable them to bring on some additional resilience-focused staff and incorporate some additional programming. So I was really excited to see how they were able to take this program as kind of step 1 and then actually move into implementation. And just to note quickly our timeline, we launched May 5th. We are in our first Learning Collaborative cohort now, which means that folks, we have, I think, 54 properties undergoing assessment now from a mix of for-profit and nonprofit owners and operators from across the state. We are recruiting for our second Learning Collaborative cohort, which will begin in August, and would really love any assistance from folks on this call in getting this opportunity in front of multifamily owners and operators. Again, free of charge, technical assistance and support provided. And our goal really is just to get as many people engaged with this effort as possible. We do also hope to collect aggregate data about the types of hazards folks are seeing, the strategies that are kind of bubbling up most, do some heat mapping and really understand where we're seeing these things. So again, that we have that information for case making, for advocacy, as folks are out there looking for resources or addressing other policy or regulatory issues. We'll have a third opportunity as well, again, in October. So August and October, recruiting now. Again, would love to get this in front of folks. Happy to talk to anyone at any time. I'll put my contact info in the chat, but appreciate the opportunity to share this with you guys today. Here's our website, direct link to the program details and where folks can apply as well. So again, thanks so much for having me, and I will stop sharing now and see if there are any questions.
Thanks so much, Sarah. One question that comes to mind in these cohorts, the 3 different iterations of them, is there a cap to how many you want in those cohorts?
There is not right now. So we have, 54 properties, and I think that was across 10 owners right now, and folks are able to bring multiple people. I mean, that is one of the beauties of Zoom land, right? So we can have as many folks in trainings as want to come. The TA is at some level first come, first serve, but I'm not at this point concerned about, going beyond what I have resources to support. So.
Awesome. So we'll pause for a moment to see if there's any questions from audience members. I'm assuming many of you, this is not the first time you've heard of Keep Safe Florida, but still don't want to take that for granted. So I'll pause for a second to see if there's any questions before transitioning to our next speaker.
I'll put my contact info in the chat too.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So next up, we do have Natalia, who's joining us from Catalyst Miami, who's going to be sharing a little bit more on the legislative side. As many of you know, Catalyst Miami is a very close friend and partner for SFCDC, and I think just a pillar in the ecosystem at large. And they're also quite heavily involved in the Miami Climate Alliance, which is doing and leading incredible work. I had the opportunity to partake in their general meeting earlier this month and was really inspired to be in that in-person convening. So without further ado, I will find Natalia, allow you to be co-host in case you need to share screen, and take it away from us. Thanks so much.
Thank you. So happy to be here. It's really a pleasure, and I'm so grateful to be among such wonderful speakers as well. I'm in great company today. I'm actually not going to be sharing my screen. I'm going to be chatting with you guys a little bit about some of the policy areas that have been major priorities for us in the last year. As May introduced, Catalyst Miami is a community-based organization here in Miami-Dade County. We work collectively with low wealth communities and communities of color here in Miami-Dade County to identify and address the issues that are adversely impacting their lives. And climate and climate resilience actually wasn't always such a large policy area that was explicitly that we had so much capacity for at Catalyst Miami. But as an economic justice organization, so many of the challenges, the shocks and stressors that our communities were experiencing were inextricably tied to both the root causes of climate change and the ways that climate change is impacting the way that these communities are able to live and survive and have opportunities here. And in addition to that very local work, Catalyst Miami, through the climate justice movement, has taken on a lot of leadership and advocacy movement building roles throughout the state of Florida. And so I'm excited to share a little bit about some of those priorities here today, not just things that we're seeing on the ground in Miami-Dade, but things that we're hearing closely from partners like ourselves in other regions. So as I mentioned, I was going to talk about two sort of policy buckets from which lawmakers over the last year have been resourcing a lot of the way they envision a resilient Florida could be improved and created. And resilience is it's an interesting term. It's becoming more of an umbrella term because if you think about it, you can do anything and make somebody resilient or something resilient. Resilience, in its most fundamental meaning, is our ability to bounce back from something, from a shock, from a stressor that's more chronic and enduring. And at Catalyst Miami, a lot of the perspective that we bring is very simply two questions: resilience for whom, and resilience on what terms. And understanding who you're accountable to and what principles and what values you're leading with in the policymaking process is something that isn't as transparent. It's not commonly at the forefront. And through our policy advocacy work, a lot of what we do is ensuring that we have a healthy democracy, and that resilience is achieved in a way that's in line with what residents of the state of Florida need, and not just the interests of the lawmakers who have access to those resources to define and execute their vision. So the two main buckets I was going to talk about today are community safety and energy. And those two really came to mind, not just because a lot of things have happened in the last year, but really when I think about resilience and when I think about climate justice, I think about the nexus between our built environment and our natural environment, and all of the changes that are happening in both of those spaces. And I'll start off with the energy system. Just last year, we saw the largest rate increase that the state of Florida has ever had proposed and then was approved. And what does that mean? That means that the cost of energy over the next 4 years is going to become more expensive than it has ever been. That's for a number of reasons. One is because of the way that our utility companies are structured and regulated. Their monopoly business model is in this regulatory compact where they exist with a guaranteed territory of customers. And they, in exchange for that guaranteed territory of customers and also guaranteed profit, they are regulated by a group of state commissioners, or Public Service Commission. And so these commissioners are appointed by the state legislature, and they make decisions on how much energy is going to cost, what service is going to look like, what kind of questions they ask of these utility companies, and determining how transparent they need to be throughout the rulemaking and policymaking process, how they're going to transition or shift their business model when anything outside of their company changes, right? The types of decisions that any business would have to make, usually within the market, and pressured by, the type of accountability that we can exercise through our choice and our agency as consumers, and that other businesses, right, could create that pressure through. But since the utility companies exist on their own as monopolies, the Public Service Commission is intended to do that. Now, for many reasons, it has not served that accountability purpose very well. And just this last year, like I mentioned, we saw a $4.9 billion rate increase. It was not only the largest rate increase that we've seen in Florida, it was also a very significant proceeding that it happened in, where FPL was merged with Gulf Power. So the territory grew for the utility company. They now serve the largest number of customers not only in the state of Florida, but they're the largest utility company in the United States. With that immense territory and access to resources, there's also immense responsibility. And when we talk about resilience policy, it's households, small businesses, crucial commercial and industrial businesses, and their ability to provide many services that have become essential based on their access to electricity. In homes, also your access to heating and cooling and lighting, right? So all of these different things are dependent on the reliability of the energy system, on the affordability of energy and electricity, and they're determined in these proceedings. And so what we're seeing right now at that level and in that space is, number one, an over-reliance on gas. You and I know, I mean, even at the pump, you can see the price of gas is extremely volatile and it's on the rise. And we know that that is also not siloed away from the broader reason that brings us here today to discuss resilience at depth, and that's climate change. And continuing this over-reliance on gas not only adds fuel to that literal fire, but it also exacerbates at the other side a lot of the resources and opportunities and just ability for a lot of us to be able to cope with the impacts of climate change. Because if you don't have access to affordable energy services to meet your needs, you are disproportionately exposed to a lot of those shocks and stressors that climate change is exacerbating, like extreme storms, like indoor pollution, like extreme heat, right? When you don't have access to, for example, a cooling system that you can afford. And we've also seen at the same time that we have this over-reliance on gas and a lot of also design. This rate case and the rate structure was designed to entrench the monopoly business model of these utilities and to ensure that they, over the next several years, are investing in large capital projects that diminish the agency of their customers. How could you have agency if you have no choice over what company you're getting your energy from? Well, as we transition to renewable energy, people have a lot more options, or at least they should have a lot more options of how they can generate electricity. The beautiful thing about renewables is the infrastructure itself is also distributed, not just the benefits. So by having access to opportunities to invest in local renewable energy, people can benefit much more than we've ever experienced than we've ever experienced from the energy system. And so there have been a lot of attacks on energy choice, on very fundamental aspects of our democracy in the state of Florida, in order to maintain that stronghold on ultimately our electricity bills and to preserve what is now a very outdated business model that also needs to transition as we grapple with 21st century challenges. So that's one major policy bucket. It's been a big priority for us. For example, this session we saw HB 741. It was a bill around net metering, which is a really wonky term, but essentially having to do with the cost of and the credit back to consumers of rooftop solar and making that investment. And there was a severe lack of accountability. Ultimately, the bill was vetoed. There's a severe lack of accountability to from lawmakers to their own constituents. This bill was by a very, very strong majority opposed by Floridians, Florida voters across party lines, across gender, generation. But it was passed by both the Florida House and the Florida Senate. And because of this severe lack of accountability that we not only saw this session, but in previous sessions, we created a tool. It's called the Florida Climate Score. It's an education tool, a transparency tool, an accountability tool. It's a scorecard of sorts. Like I mentioned, the Florida Climate Score. And what it does is it tracks lawmakers on their key votes that we in coalition identify that are key to ensuring environmental and climate justice through state legislation. And so I'll drop a link in the chat. Again, it's flclimatescore, actually .com or .org, whichever you prefer. And there you can see a legislator from any part of the state. You can filter to find yours and see how on past bills they've scored. It does not include our 2022 bills yet. So part of this is an invitation that if you'd like to be a part of that space to be able to contribute to how we identify those bills, it's an open invitation. We're looking for what are the key bills and issue areas that were discussed this legislative session that we as organizations feel are important, that there is greater transparency on, that people have access to a resource where they can see how their lawmaker voted. So that in their next engagement with that lawmaker, or when they're thinking about their vote, they are able to know how their lawmaker voted ultimately when the decision was in their hands. And the second major thing I wanted to talk about was something really, really serious and concerning in the budget, very related to what Sarah was just talking about, and our ability to cope with and respond to hazards and disasters. This year, Governor DeSantis started a conversation, or brought up a conversation about bringing military-style operations to emergency management. And we saw that $10 million were allocated from the state budget to fund a 400-member Florida State Guard, which is essentially a state militia that is, for the most part, under executive control of the governor, to be a sort of civilian emergency response force. And they cited the fact that there is an increasingly active hurricane season that is projected for our state, and that there's a need for better resources and ability to cope with both the burden and the necessity of preparedness, and also afterwards, like in the aftermath of the storm, ability to recover. But the main purpose of this body is to assist civil authorities in maintaining quote unquote law and order during both of these periods. And so with that, my call to action, my question to you, my prompt to you as we discuss today is, in maintaining community safety. Well, first of all, community safety is resilience. Our community's ability to be safe, to be healthy, to prosper is resilience. That supports their resilience, their ability to bounce back from any shock or stressor. What does community safety look like? What do we need? We are talking about $10 million here to build a militia. What do we need? Where do we need that type of capital, those types of resources to be able to ensure community safety? So I pose that to you all. This militia is supposed to be up and running by July 1st. And it was just announced, the finalized announcement was just less than 2 weeks ago. So it's incredible how quickly the money moves and the implementation happens when you have the political will and the resources to do so. So in the spirit of talking about agency and equity, I would encourage you all to just think about how we could better use those resources to really ensure community safety for the people that are most impacted, most harmed in the face of these hazards and disasters.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Natalia. I do have a question going back to not necessarily the net metering bill, but what I saw in last legislative session and what generally tends to be true in Florida is a lot of working to defeat these bad bills and to stop all of this bad legislation. Is there or are there currently any priorities that you are aware of that we can be more proactive in the sense of let's push and promote something that's going to do good instead of just trying to stop the bad from taking over?
Yeah, that's a great question. There have been several. So in terms of the energy system, that was the ballpark that I was talking about, the state legislature. There have been several efforts. One I can highlight is there was incredible, both through the legal system and through just grassroots advocacy, campaigning by several youth, now former plaintiffs in the Reynolds versus State of Florida climate case. It was formal litigation against the state of Florida by a group of youth who saw issue with the way that the state of Florida has failed to prepare for and to protect the youth from the impacts of climate change. And they got to the point where they created a petition for a rulemaking by the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, which is led by Commissioner Nikki Freed, to create a goal for the state of Florida, a standard for the state of Florida to start adopting renewable energy at pace with what climate scientists have told us is reasonable and necessary to avoid the worst possible consequences of climate change, right? And so a lot of the work that we have been doing is that would be great. It would be great to have that goal established, but that goal does not have any standards for equity or enforcement, and in that regard, accountability, right? And so a lot of what we have been advocating for around that issue is yes, we need goals, and everywhere that we need goals. Well, I don't know if it'll come up in the questions, but there have been a lot of announcements around goals and a lot of interesting conversation around corporate social responsibility and how that relates to building resilience for one stakeholders. And so a lot of the work that we've been doing is ensuring that we don't just have the goals, but that we also have the pathway, right? The pathway to enforce and to actually see the outcome that is envisioned, so that all of these empowered entities that are making these commitments are staying accountable. And so I've seen that, and I've also seen there's an excellent group of activists up in Archer, North Florida, and they recently experienced a very familiar encroaching development fight by the utility company Duke Energy, where they were actually building a solar array in their neighborhood, a historically Black neighborhood in Archer. And they were never approached or consulted before this giant project was just sited in the middle of their neighborhood. They were able to organize at the local level and get the project rejected. And they ended up going to their state lawmaker and pushing their priority up to the state level and saying that as we transition to renewable energy, more and more land is going to be necessary to get sited and used for these types of projects. And how can we create a seat at the table for environmental justice advocates and leaders to be able to help you create a plan for siting energy efficiency? How are we going to mitigate as much harm as we can and ensure fair land use and changes in land use throughout the transition to renewables? And so they also had a bill that we supported and advocated. Unfortunately, the bill did not make it through all the committees that it was assigned to. But that's another key way that we could start to build the good as we fight the bad.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Definitely wanted to open it up for others if there's any questions for Natalia as it relates to legislative priorities or energy efficiency in general. Again, I know many of us are amongst close friends, but still want to provide that spaciousness if any ideas or questions emerge. So I'll pause for a moment. I would love, Natalia, if you could do two things: share your contact information as well as your question about community safety in the chat so that we can revisit that in the group discussion as people chew on that and see if any thoughts emerge. But thank you again so much for sharing space with us. And I do see Doug has a question. Are we expecting FPL to bring back the attack on net metering, which is a very good question.
That is a great question. For those who, just in case if you aren't familiar, this bill was actually drafted by an FPL lobbyist, submitted straight to the legislature who sponsored and filed the bill in the Senate with some very nice campaign contributions amounting to about $20,000 just immediately before and after. So this bill came directly from FPL. And we've had some excellent investigative journalism throughout the state, really bringing power to that narrative and what happened. I will say that the bill changed a lot throughout the process. At the end, there was a cost recovery mechanism that was added that created this very severe cross subsidy, which essentially is when one group of customers ends up paying the difference for another group of customers just to benefit the profit margin of the utility company. And that really just crossed the line. In the governor's eyes, it's what he cited in his reason for vetoing the bill. in addition to just the rising cost of living, and just how unacceptable it would be to do anything at this point that only makes energy more expensive for Floridians. And so a lot of partners have suggested, and I believe it's absolutely possible that we will see another attack on net metering. The reason I mentioned the cost recovery kind of addendum there is because I think it's very possible we'll see the exact same bill without that, the same way that it started, or a later draft of it when there was more consensus among lawmakers. I think it's very likely that we'll see that same bill again, and they just won't take that extra crazy step of the cost recovery clause. But this is the third year that we've seen in different forms attacks on net metering. Net metering is the right of customers to be able to get fair credit for the power that they're producing, and it threatens ultimately the monopoly's business model, their ability to exercise complete control over not just prices but the infrastructure and our use, how efficient the infrastructure is. Like they take away all of our agency by doing so, and then they in turn get all of the choices, all of the decision-making power. So it's very likely that we'll see another attack on net metering. My short answer is I think it could even be the same bill.
Yeah, I would not be surprised, but thank you so much again for sharing your thoughts and expertise on that particular arena. And we look forward to standing in solidarity and supporting not only in advocacy during the early legislative session in 2023, but year round with all the different moving pieces, both grassroots and grass tops. So now I think we're ready to sort of shift into a more localized view. And so I'm happy to welcome Jim from the Office of Resilience, who has so graciously joined us for this afternoon's convening. And I will pass it to him. Happy to share the deck on your behalf, Jim. You just let me know when you need the next slide, and we'll do that. So give me a moment. Why don't you introduce yourself while I pull that up?
Thanks, May, and thank you for the invitation. And I hope we can pass forward some information and respond to questions. I did see the calendar, the agenda shows 20 minutes for the next 3 speakers. So I don't want to, if that's what we're at, I'm going to speed through some slides.
Yeah, that's really fine. We actually, you have more, you can probably have about 15 minutes total.
Okay, good.
So
I won't, I don't want to take time away from any of the other 2 speakers who I want to hear. But I will, with your help, present an overview PowerPoint of the Office of Resilience activities, its plans and policies, and certainly answer any questions. I would say right at the front end here to all of our audience members, we are available to make these presentations in person or by Zoom upon request. Join any kind of format meeting that meets an organization's needs, so that we can continue to hear from our community about how we can improve our work and we can communicate what we are doing. So next slide, please. I think, Natalia did a really great job setting this up. Resilience is a word that has many meanings. Certainly, it's been identified recently with a set of climate issues, but the way we use it in Miami-Dade County is a broad sweep of issues that affect our community, both stresses and shocks that we need to plan for. As the mayor will say, if we don't plan, we don't know really where we're headed, and we don't know how to prioritize the things that we need to do. So you'll see that we have a broad resilience strategy that covers the issues identified under this little diagram. Next slide, please. The office has grown under the sponsorship of Mayor Danielle Levine-Common, the support of the commission. We have our core work in climate, in mitigating greenhouse gases. We have a team that works very closely in county operations, but in the entire community. Adaptation is very important as we prepare for long-term changes from sea level rise and its effect on compound flooding. This communications as a unit of our office reflects the importance we put on the very thing we're doing right now, which is to connect to our citizens and to listen and to pass forward information. Under the mayor, Levine Cava, she's added 3 other new important priorities, which really on their own are important, but they are in our office so that we can leverage them and we can provide them support. Our focus on Biscayne Bay, Chief Bay Officer Aurela Begay, who is implementing the recommendations of the task force. A lot going on there, worthy of an entire PowerPoint. Jane Gilbert, our Chief Heat Officer. They will have they've had a task force and panel. They will have a report here this summer, and they will be identifying key actions to implement that. Extreme heat has become so important as a long-term and something we're experiencing really right away currently as a consequence of climate change. And our Future Ready package is under Kim Brown, and it's really a focus the Mayor Cava wants to have, and it's just beginning. That she realizes that planning for the future of Miami-Dade County isn't lodged just in Miami-Dade County. It's going on with a lot of public entities, private entities, utility companies, as you just heard a very excellent description. And she'd like to get a better idea how to connect to those and how to use her leadership as mayor to guide them. So Kim Brown's a key player. Right now, she's focused on EV transition of electric vehicles. Next slide, please. Our reports start with a overall resilience strategy that we did several years ago with the cities of Miami and Miami Beach. It's now a partnership with all 34 of our municipalities, and many of them have their own sustainability or resilience strategy. So I wouldn't want to be remiss if I didn't tell you to check in with the city you live in. Of course, if you're an unincorporated Miami-Dade, then our county work is your direct link. And we are, these strategies are both dealing with adaptation and climate mitigation are in this document. And I won't go into the document in detail, but in there you'll see far more, 59 action items. You can find this at resilient305.com, and I think it's going to show up on your chat. And that's part of our partnership with the Miami Foundation. They play a very important role with us in giving us additional resources and ability to connect with different parties. So that's the overarching plan. We're measuring this implementation. We're, by the way, working very closely with the universities to get their help on this strategy also. Next slide. So Miami-Dade's work takes place in the context of over 10 years of experience working across county lines from the Florida Keys to Palm Beach. We have had annual summits. You'll see that link to the Regional Climate Action Plan. It's being updated as we speak, worthy of your review. This is a regional piece that allows sharing of information between county and city staffs, but also not-for-profits that work in all 4 counties. And it's been very important in shaping the way the state thinks about how to do climate change now that they've engaged far more than they have in the past. Next slide, please. It is through the work of the Climate Compact that every 5 years, a committee of scientists and other professionals in that 4-county region sit down and look at the published reports and peer-reviewed papers and make a projection of sea level rise that is going to affect these 4 counties. We have some aspects of where we are relative to the Atlantic, the Florida current, the Gulf Stream, that changes things from even the effects of the sea level rise up on the Space Coast in Jacksonville. So it's important to focus down this international and national data and get a good working idea of what we're looking for in the future. We are committed to revise this every 5 years. We've done 3 updates. That little picture just shows you, though, we have some as Caroline Lewis would say, existential challenges ahead of us dealing with these issues. Next slide, please. The next couple of slides are more pictures. This is important the way we think about where we are, where we've been, and where we're going. Literally, the people who came here to Southeast Florida before us, and we ourselves currently intervene in the day-to-day operation of the environment in a way that allows us to be here. We turn the swamp into something that attracts a lot of people. It won't stay that way given climate change. So we have to have an active set of policies going forward. And as I say in all of my presentations, we won't look the same as we do today, just like we don't look today like we did 100 years ago. So these next couple pictures are to maybe help on that. Next slide, please. I'm sure you've seen some of these historic pictures back to the beginning of the 20th century. The Everglades came all the way to where we now know as the Miami International Airport. And existing rivers and sloughs like the Miami River or Little River became canals, and other canals were dug. Next slide, please. And out further west of us, Everglades restoration, which is the largest ecosystem restoration project in the world, is really about managing water. And while we are creating wetlands that enable to cleanse the water and move it south, we need large containment sessions like this with pumps. So make no mistake about it, in the Everglades and in our urban area, we have to learn to live with water. We have to manage water to be successful as we move forward. Next slide, please. Yeah, okay, next slide. There, think of the dramatic change that in just over 100 years, and it's ongoing. And this is a challenge. We, a 10-inch rain, well, that's a big rain. We had flooding in Brickell, flooding in other areas in our county. That's without a hurricane storm surge. So this is the challenge, because the development, in fact, does help give us resources to do the adaptation and mitigation we need to do, but it also exposes us in terms of risk and loss if we were to experience a significant storm, which we haven't, by the way, experienced since Hurricane Andrew in 1992, and the last hurricane that hit this area in this picture was 1928. Next slide, please. So the sea level rise does affect areas further inland, because the sea level, the rise of the ocean and the salt water being heavier than fresh, add in the other element of living here in Southeast Florida, that we live on lime rock, which is stable but porous. So the salt water moves inland, it pushes up the water table and affects our ability to handle drainage through the ground during rain events and storm events. So it isn't just a coastal, it isn't just a Miami Beach issue, it isn't just a shoreline issue, it is an inland issue. And that's why our approaches deal with all those. Next slide, please. This is pictures and some of the projections 2060, which we think it'll be about 2 feet of real sea level rise that we'll be dealing with. Now, when you have 2 feet of real sea level rise and you have king tides in the fall, those events are worse. And if you do experience a heavy rain event like we did before, the drainage is compromised. And worst of all, if we experience a storm surge ahead of a hurricane making landfall in the county, then it's compounded by the rise in the height of the ocean. Next slide, please. You've seen these canals. We have a lattice effect of a primary, secondary, and tertiary canals that maintain water levels and drain us and provide water to Biscayne Bay and to the well field in the Northwest. But they were designed to be drained by gravity. And today there are times when the head of the canal is higher than the water flowing into the canal. So that's requiring the insertions of what we call force pumps. This is the one at right near the airport. You'll see more of these as part of a plan by the Water Management District. And when you see this kind of a structure with the gates and the pump, you're looking at something that more likely is under the management of the South Florida Water Management District. The county has some, cities have some, but the primary system is that in control of that regional agency. Next slide, please. So we can move forward one more. As I said, this slide kind of focuses the idea that in a county as big as we are, we're the size of Rhode Island, with a population of 3 million people, which makes us bigger than a half dozen states, that there isn't one solution that fits all, that there has to be a selection of focuses as you go across what we call this transect from the near shore of the ocean all the way to the Everglades. And again, within that area are 34 cities, which are important partners as we make our way forward. So this, we have a whole part of our organized approach and our sea level rise strategy is to look at these sub areas of the county. Next slide, please. The climate action strategy is where we're going to mitigate as much as we can our share of the greenhouse gas emissions coming from the activities of the county government. It's about 5% of the total, and the community at large. Everything else going on in the community. We'll go one more slide. This is where we were in our last biannual inventory. You need to know we have been doing this as long as any county in the United States, over 20 years. So we have a tremendous data set, and each year the ability to monitor the data improves. But you can see in where we are, we're not an industrial base. So the emissions are coming from the generation of electricity. Talia got into that in a really important way. And transportation. So the vehicles, the airport and the seaport, those are actually, when we total them all up, you see that they're more than half. And then there's a certain amount of our energy that creates the use of energy that is used for wastewater energy and incineration of waste that has an emission component. So you'll see that. But it narrows our focus to what is the real sources of our emissions. And so much of this is tied to how we get electricity, from getting it from rooftops, solar, to how it's generated for this utility system or the grid. And that's really important. There's NextEra Energy, which owns Florida Power and Light, and Florida Power and Light put out some really interesting new documents. I'm not going to take time to try to explain them, but it's worth time for our community to get much better understanding of where they are going with what they call their real zero plan. Next slide, please. And again, this is our focus of actions, and we have in the documents, which are all online at mybidet.gov/resilience. You'll see more specific actions and tools in these areas. Next slide. Boom, 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 boom. You know, you may have heard about the SMART plan, the ability to expand our transit system and having housing, workforce and affordable housing at the stations. There's a plus win for us if that's a successful implementation. We will reduce greenhouse gases in our transportation system. We'll give our transit dependent populations choices. For moving around for mobility, they don't have the day, and they'll save money that they can apply to other things. And so there are a vast number of things going on in conjunction with the SMART plan. But the SMART plan is a huge investment by the county and something we all should find a way to support and get these other multiple benefits identified. Next slide, please. We have emission reduction goals. Let's keep going here. Keep going, please. We really do focus on energy buildings. Next slide, please. Building efficiency 305 is quite similar to what Sarah talked about in many ways. Anything over 20,000 square feet countywide I would just ask that anyone who has interest, we can take questions on them, or we come back and give you more detail on this. Next slide, please. Land use and transportation, implementation of the CDMP. Let's not make land use amendments to the CDMP, which make the situation worse. Also, I'll say about that right now. Next slide, please. I don't think we're getting some of the presentation coming up, but I don't want to take time from the other speakers. And we talked about water and waste. Next slide, please. You know, this is where Jane would be come in and go into detail. Jane Gilbert. This is our new initiative, task force report coming out. Next slide, please. And we really have some outstanding professionals in our community that are leading the way on this. And, you know, this goes from expanding our tree canopy to working with the right kinds of policies for workers that are out in the heat, and a whole lot more as we proceed, because this is definitely a stress and a shock that we won't see go away. Next slide, please. So I'm through with the presentation. Appreciate the time. I know we tried to cover quite a bit. We'll have the PowerPoint with all the images on the online, and I'd be happy to take questions now or after the other panel speakers.
I think it's fine to open it up now, and thanks again for the very thorough and concise presentation. I think there's a lot of great information in there. There's certain parts that I find personally very exciting, such as, you know, the transportation goals and whatnot, which ties into our next speaker. But just wanted to open it up. I did see the chat pretty active with Karina sharing some resources and points, but not sure if others had any questions that they wanted to address at this time. I'll pause momentarily.
Hey, there was a question from Natalia Brown. What do you envision? The question, Jim, is what do you envision is necessary to improve community safety and disaster preparedness and recovery? There, I got it out.
Very good.
Just to, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Just to clarify, I'm not putting Jim on the spot. May had asked me, I posed that question to everybody. That was for a discussion later. So don't mean to put Jim on the spot. That was just as a resource for everybody.
All right.
Yeah, and it's a good question, and maybe what my county had on, not necessarily resilience. The mayor has a new emergency management director, and he is, Pete Gomez has come from the city. The mayor and Pete understand the need that emergency management preparation and recovery is not just about government, it's also about our community organizations, and working with the Miami Foundation on getting new resources out. Well worth a further discussion. Thanks, Natalie.
Absolutely, and I look forward to diving into that a little bit more in the group discussion. So if there's no other burning questions at the moment, what we'll do is transition to our next speaker. And who we have up next is Mark, who is one of the newest members of our dear friends at Transit Alliance Miami. So Mark, without further ado, feel free to introduce yourself and let me know if you need help sharing screens.
Sure thing. Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. My name is Mark Merwitzer. I am a newish associate with Transit Alliance. We are a nonprofit. Let me actually go ahead and pull up the presentation. We are a nonprofit that is focused on increasing mobility and doing community outreach for transportation-related issues across Miami-Dade County. Go ahead and start the presentation. So Miami, it's beautiful, has beaches, and is honestly one of the nicest destinations in the world for people to come and visit us. But unfortunately, with being a city, that comes with traffic. Lots and lots and lots of traffic. And unfortunately, the conventional way of approaching the traffic problem has been adding more lanes, adding more car-dependent developments on the outskirts of our county, and continuously prioritizing the automobile over any other transportation solution, which comes at a major cost to our environment and quality of life throughout Miami-Dade County. So just by a show of hands here, how many of you all have ridden the bus within the last month or so? Just show of hands. We got one person, awesome. So I'll get into the reason for that. And to be honest, I am not asking that out of like, hey, how many of y'all are actual transit users? Like, y'all have to do this all the time. And the reason for that is honestly, our transit system has not been up to par. I'm gonna go ahead and go through all of this, and it has not been up to standard. We need to have a focus on our bus system throughout Miami-Dade County. And in its current form, if you want to get from, let's say, point A to point B, you're not necessarily taking the best route to get there. Let's say you want to get from Douglas Road to somewhere along Bird Road. This is one of your routes available, which is Route 40, which does all of these loops and comes maybe once an hour. Another example is in South Dade, where we have routes taking very interesting paths and are never direct to where you need to go. And well, trying to navigate this mess is extremely challenging for irregular users. So moving forward, 95 Express is a fantastic route because it takes you directly to where you need to go, has a lot of amenities, and is extremely frequent. So thanks for highlighting that route. Another route, but long story short, our organization was the very first organization to lead a redesign of the bus system across the entire county. We did this through surveys, community events, text conversations. If you've been on a bus within the last 2 or 3 years, you've probably seen, hey, this route is subject to change. And the reason for that is we are trying to make it more frequent and more accessible for everyone across this county, especially those who are in low-income communities who are dependent on transit, who cannot otherwise afford a car and otherwise cannot drive because of impairments or mobility challenges. So the Better Bus Network, as a result of our organizing and community-led action, we have increased service to over 353,000 residents across this county and have increased just service across the board. The way we did that, long story short, is we took the routes that I showed earlier that are scrambling all over the place across the county. We streamlined them, increased the service, and did everything possible to make it so you want to get from point A to point B, that ride is as fluid as possible. So moving on, what are we doing next? Well, unfortunately, despite the fact that the Better Bus Network passed by the unanimous support of the County Commission, unfortunately, there have been challenges in rolling it out because of bus operator shortages. As you all know, the country is facing a major labor shortage. If you've been to an airport recently or have traveled over Memorial Day, or you plan on traveling over 4th of July, you're going to see firsthand what that labor shortage looks like in the travel industry. Just basically every industry across the nation is facing operator shortfalls. But at Transit Alliance, we believe that this challenge that is a national issue can be solved at a local level. And we want to launch this as soon as possible, this new bus network that I previously just mentioned. So what does that entail? It entails hiring new bus operators, providing resources to the Department of Transportation. We're in the works of partnering with Miami-Dade College and the Department of Transportation to move forward with this rollout, which will transform transportation services across Miami-Dade County. So getting into some of the other advocacy here, I'll go ahead and just go over that. But long story short, why does this matter? Why does having a frequent, safe, and reliable bus system matter? Well, if we want our county to hit our emissions goals, we need to provide ways to get people out of their automobile and find ways to get people to move without emitting carbon. So the county climate action strategy that was just mentioned by the previous presenter went into our county's climate action goal. And if we face a 20% ridership increase, we can see substantial emission reductions as a result of taking vehicles off the road. And the county can get 10% of their way there towards their 2030 goal of emissions just by implementing the BBN from our research. And again, just more data just showing how important this is. This is the equivalent of taking about 6,700 vehicles off the road if just 5% of those 353,000 residents decide to start traveling with transit or taking trips with transit. So moving on, we want to make it easier for people to reduce individuals' carbon footprint by up to 1/3. And if they switch to the bus, that is a way they can do that. So moving forward, some other initiatives that we are doing is Build It, Bike It. We're huge fans of cycling infrastructure, especially like, for example, at the Rickenbacker with the recent unfortunate events that happened on that causeway, but also just a county-wide vision as to what we want our county to look like in terms of mobility, and that includes biking. It's a fantastic way for a first mile, last mile solution. For those who are unfamiliar, once you get off the bus, you still maybe have a small distance to get to your destination, and we want to make that as easy as possible. And we want the county to implement a county-wide bike network and make sure that's adequately funded. The CO2 emissions released from driving just 1 mile is over 411 grams of carbon. By biking, well, it's whatever you ate that day is how much carbon you're releasing into the atmosphere. And we're also asking everyone to get involved in the City of Miami Bike Master Plan that's going to be reviewed by the city in the very near future. So important, because this is going to be setting the framework for the City of Miami's Bike Master Plan for the next 20 years. So extremely important to get involved in that if you want to get people again out of their cars and into more sustainable mobility solutions. So other focus reforms that we're doing is the AARP initiative. We're trying to remove barriers to mobility for seniors, especially those who are having challenges with driving, and also just first mile, last mile projects that I just mentioned earlier. And again, we're trying to, oh, 1 second, someone's trying to join. Whoever the host is, oh, yeah, thank you. Long story short, we're trying to make it so it's easier to get around without a car, no matter who you are. So if you all would like to, I'm happy to answer questions on any of these initiatives. But yeah, we'd appreciate any of your support for the future. And yeah, that is a presentation. I wanted to keep it brief, and thank you all for your time.
Thanks so much, Mark. I am such a fan of the work that you all do at Transit Alliance. I am a car-free person by choice, and so I'm a huge advocate for public transportation and very excited to see this better bus network come to life sooner than later. So very glad to have you all as members of the coalition and as allies in this important work for community development, especially from a sustainability lens. Thanks again. I will pause there to see if there are any questions. In the audience, you all have been very quiet, but I'm hoping that y'all will get your afternoon cafecito and wake up just momentarily. We have one more presenter before we dive into our group discussion, and we're hoping to keep it lively and engaging. We want to hear your thoughts, your lived experience as experts, not only as professionals, but as residents of this beautiful county. How we can work together to make it more resilient and sustainable. So I'll pause for a few moments for any questions for Mark about Transit Alliance, and we'll get ready to transition to our final presenter, Megan from the UM team. Go Canes. Let's see here.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
How do we get involved with that bike master plan if we're interested in that?
Sure. So I believe I saw Aaron here as well. We've been engaging with various communities or various people across the city of Miami and gathering input. If you'd like to send me an email, I'm going to go ahead and put my email into the chat box and I'll be in contact with you. And yeah, I also see another question here is how are we intersecting bikes with buses? So going back to my previous point regarding the first mile, last mile, when you take public transportation, it doesn't necessarily take you up to your door as to where you're trying to go. So you still have that very small area as to where you have to get from the stop to where you're going. So bikes are a really great way to move forward and get from the bus stop to where you're going. So that's where it intersects. And Aaron just shared some fantastic resources as to the suggestions you can make, shared in the chat there. Kimberly Horn is the people who are making the master plan, so you can also direct feedback to them. And yeah, with Dade County, you can put, Jim, if you also want to talk on this, you can put your bike on the front of most buses. They're not allowed on the bus itself, but on the front of the bus, you're able to put your bike on there. And I've done that with personal experience.
Very interesting. I'm actually curious to learn more about that myself. I have that little, last mile issue myself. And to be quite honest, if you've never done the bus bike thing before, it can be intimidating because you don't want to hold up the bus. You don't want to, be that person getting in the way. So I think it'd be helpful to share more information on that in some more broader context. But Jim, if you have a response to that, please feel free.
I think that's accurate. As far as the buses on the Metro Rail, Metro Mover, I think you can take the bike onto the vehicle yourself. At least that's what I do.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And oh, good. There's somebody that knows. And then I think there may be even on our city-run, the rubber tire. Searching for the word. The small buses that the cities run.
The trolleys.
Trolleys, thank you. I think there's some of those have the front loader too, but I understand that feeling about holding up the riders, and yeah, there may be, I think that, but I'm sure the county would be open to any other suggestions. Thank you.
Very good. Well, with that said, we will transition to our next and final speaker, Megan. Thanks so much for joining us from Team UM. I will allow you to introduce yourself. I'm looking for you so I can make you co-host to share screen.
Okay. Thanks, May. Hi, my name is Megan Donovan. Thank you so much, May and Sam, for giving me the opportunity to share the work we're doing here at the Office of Civic and Community Engagement at the University of Miami. So our mission is to enhance university community collaborations by engaging the university's academic resources and the enrichment of civic and community life in South Florida. We seek to accomplish this by connecting students, faculty, and community organizations together in a collaborative process that translates academic knowledge into civic responsibility to promote positive social change. And if you want to check us out on the web, I'm going to drop the link to our website here. So before, let me share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see the PowerPoint? Okay. I usually get like a green border, but I'm not seeing that right now. So I'm gonna make sure. Whoop. Okay. All right, so we can all see this figure.
Yes. Good to know.
Okay, awesome, thank you. So before I talk about this figure, I'd first just like to acknowledge that the University of Miami resides on land of the Seminole Tribe of Florida, the Council of the original Miccosukee Seminole Nation Aboriginal people, and the Miccosukee Tribe of Indians of Florida. We fully support Indigenous sovereignty, and we will continue to work to increase accountability to the needs of American Indian and Indigenous peoples. So with that, this figure is from the U.S. Global Change Research Program. It might be something that you've seen before, but I really like starting with this because I think it is a great framework for the work that we do here in this office, I guess specifically like my realm of the work that we do. And it really shows sort of like all the different dimensions of extreme heat and health and the intersection of those two. So really, at the end of the day, I feel like this is, like the main point of this is showing that like housing disparities are health disparities, right? People have to make choices that are cost burdened to pay rent as opposed to paying for healthcare, for example. There's also an array of different exposures in substandard housing. And so that risk increases too when people have underlying medical issues, and extreme heat exposure in general is going to affect people with underlying issues, and small children, pregnant women, the elderly differently. And then also we have a lot of affordable housing initiatives in this office, but I did want to, I think this gets lost in the conversation sometimes. And I did want to highlight the fact that, there is homelessness, and, that's also a part of this, the intersection of, heat exposure and health access. That's for that particularly vulnerable group. So our office is home to a lot of initiatives, and I'm just not going to explain them all for the sake of time, and just focus on one of our housing initiatives, the one I manage, called CAMP, which stands for Climate and Equity Mapping Platform. So CAMP is an extension of the housing resiliency work that was done previously out of our office. And then this project focuses on the impacts of extreme heat exposure on communities in Miami-Dade County. So I'm going to share a link to our affordable housing initiatives, so you can check those out if you'd like. Also, I'm going to share just like a couple quick one-pagers of the housing resiliency work that was previously done and our climate and equity mapping platform CAMP, just like a little one-page description. Okay, so there's the CAMP one. Okay. And there's the housing resiliency one. Okay. Yeah, so if you want to check out some of the other resources and tools that we have as part of our Housing Solutions Lab, that link's in the chat there. So I'd like to highlight our MAP tool that stands for Miami Affordability Project. This was originally launched in 2014 to provide planners, housing advocates, municipalities, nonprofits focused on equitable community development, so basically all of us, with access to data about public and assisted housing in Miami-Dade County. And since its original launch, it was expanded and includes now over 300 data filters. Most recently, a new version was launched a couple years ago that includes indicators about sea level rise and storm surge projection, so that you can visualize how climate impacts affordable housing. So I took a screenshot of just like an example of something you can visualize with MAP. So this visual is showing sea level rise projections with cost burden rental units, and then the dots are the affordable housing units overlaid on top of that. So as I mentioned earlier, I manage our CAMP project. Overall, this project's focused on the disparate impacts of extreme heat on affordable housing. And this grew out of our previous housing resiliency work, which we've always engaged a diverse set of stakeholders, and I mean diverse in the way of like different expertise and different roles in the community. And in fact, a lot of our collaborators are right here in the Zoom room. So hi. And ooh, I skipped ahead, sorry. Let's go back. Okay. So one of the primary deliverables of this project is to update what we already have going on with MAP and adding in extreme heat indicators. So also we're working on some community engagement workshops. We're developing that in close collaboration with SFCDC. And also we're creating a couple toolkits. One is a policy toolkit. So it will identify strategies for addressing ways to improve affordable housing in the face of climate threats. And then our communications toolkit will be sort of like a roadmap for other municipalities or urban spaces to reproduce what we've found to be best practices for kind of developing these community-driven equitable development tools and resources. So here are the extreme heat indicators we've identified, and we have them kind of in these categories that that really this grew out of like a long series of engagement with our community stakeholder group. This is sort of an ongoing iterative process that, you know, we're always asking our stakeholders like what they think we should be doing and what's important to include and to visualize, you know, in the context of heat and how that affects affordable housing in Miami-Dade County. So I'm not just going to like read off all of these, but basically you get an idea of what we're going to augment with MAP in our CAMP launch. So I wanted to share just some like preliminary analyses that we've done using the data that we will ultimately add into our map tool. So the image on the left shows surface temperature in Miami-Dade County, and then it has the little boxes with the crosshatches are the whole, excuse me, redlining grades overlaid. So you might already know HOLC stands for Homeowners Loan Corporation. This was created in the 1930s. There's a ranking system where like A basically means the best and D means hazardous. And so the lower grade neighborhoods were essentially excluded from homeownership opportunities. And so the effects of this redlining is felt today. And that's really apparent when you look at sort of how things like temperature and tree canopy look across these different neighborhoods. So the graphs on the right show both temperature and tree canopy as a function of this HOLC grade. So, excuse me, I know the letters are really small, but the A all the way to the right on the x-axis and the temperature one, that's like the best grade, right? And so there's the lowest surface temperature on average. And it's really almost like this is a best fit line, but it's practically a straight line. Like as the HOLC grades go like sort of down, I guess, towards hazardous, that temperature increases. And so then with tree canopy, we have a really, similar thing going on where sort of the better the grade, the more trees there are. So I wanted to share this because I think this is a really striking visual that really shows, climate disparities as they relate to health disparities, housing disparities, right? They're all embedded in this historical context. And this is going to be part of, we're going to start putting out some like quick to read like info sheets so that people can kind of get this information like really fast, quick and dirty kind of a thing. Because, developing this tool and these resources like takes several months, but we already have a lot of really good analysis and information from the data that we've been collecting to include. And so we want to share that with people and give them something that's like easy to read and like disseminate to other folks. So the community engagement workshops that we're collaborating with May and Sam on, we've really just sort of started figuring out what this is going to look like. So basically we want to roll these out July through August and have them in person in these neighborhoods listed here. And then also we want to offer like a hybrid version for that South Dade one so that, really anybody can join if they'd like to. And the idea is that basically we'll demo what, we'll sort of bead and map as part of camp and really just we're trying to get feedback from people in the community. We're trying to understand like, what we can do sort of at that critical moment before the launch, make sort of those last minute changes and or, kind of get a sense of what, the future of this work should be from those community members. So this will involve like a pre-survey and maybe like a post-survey, or we'll have folks like answer it in the room before they leave or something like that. And then by October, we'd like to have a report out. Really that's just kind of a synthesis of all this feedback that we can share. So for the policy toolkit, basically we just have kind of a basic structure right now. It'll introduce kind of like the need for extreme heat policy in South Florida, what that looks like here currently and projections. And then also, of course, focusing on equity and climate mitigation and resiliency. Also, we'll go through, the stuff we do for stakeholder engagement. We have quarterly meetings where, we sort of present kind of what we've been doing, and we have some questions usually for folks, and sometimes the discussion goes in, in a different direction entirely, and that's cool. We like that. We want to know what people are thinking about and what we should be thinking about as we're developing these tools. So basically the structure will be for the box on the left here. This is basically like, we're going to be talking about policies kind of like as they affect the individual, zoom out to housing unit neighborhood, and then city countywide. And then for each of those, I guess, levels, then we'll have these components in this red box on the right here for each of these levels. So that's sort of the approach we're taking now. For our communications toolkit, we really just have kind of a, excuse me, an idea of what the table of contents will be. So it'll be basically be like a how to use this, you know, is this for you kind of thing. Then we'll talk about how camp came to be. And then talk about funding. So like the types, the people you want to collaborate with, how you communicate with funders or potential funders. Then developing the mapping tool, selecting the data, you know, making sure you're thinking about data equity, you know, the user experience, things like that. Then stakeholder engagement, of course. So this would be like, you know, basically trying to center the community's stories and experiences and expertise in the work that we're doing. And then finally, basically like, if you're outside of Miami and you kind of want to do the thing that we did, like how do you do that? How do you adapt this for your purposes outside of here? And so then just looking ahead, these are kind of like the areas where, you know, our stakeholders have identified and we've internally identified that this work is probably headed. And I think the public health piece, I just want to highlight that because I feel like this has really come out to be one of the more important pieces. Because the way that it relates to housing is complicated and it deserves a lot more attention than we can kind of give it in this project. And we've had some discussions with medical faculty members here at UM to understand the issue more broadly and try to forge some, you know, partnerships and continue this work and continue this research. So with that, there's all our info and me. And so if you want to be a part of our stakeholder group, if you want to just chat about some of this stuff, feel free. And I'm happy to take questions or talk about anything. Thank you.
Awesome. Well done, Megan. Thanks again. We're super excited about working in collaboration with UM on this project and the many iterations of it. As you saw at the top of the call, Florida or Keep Safe Florida is a tool. So we thought we would round off the conversation with another tool that is out there and accessible for folks. And if you're interested in engaging in those workshops that we will be hosting and facilitating with UM, please let us know, but happy to open up questions. I saw some chat activity, but not sure if there was any questions, Sam.
No, I just, there was a comment from Doug about concern that as housing costs go up, people will simply cut back on their use of air conditioning. And that's particularly worrisome for low-income elderly. I didn't see any questions per se. Did anyone have questions that they want to ask and pose to Megan?
Yeah, I will say that to Doug's point, like that worry that you have is a thing that already happens. It's absolutely a thing that already happens. I think you know, even if people can acquire an air conditioning unit, you know, do they have the money to pay the energy bill for it? So, you know, that's going to probably be the first thing that you opt out of when you're trying to save money. And then I did want to say, sorry, I wanted to just real quick plug the housing summit that's going to be happening. And I had a link, but it went away. But let me just drop that here. So here's the press release from the county website. But some of my colleagues from our office will be involved in that, and I'll be there. So we just wanted to you know, let everyone know. I also wasn't sure, maybe somebody was planning on mentioning it anyways, but I wanted to make sure it got mentioned. Thank you.
Absolutely, I appreciate your advocacy. I'm expecting most of us will be out there this Thursday to partake in the Building Blocks Housing Summit, along with the mayor and her team and all of the amazing housing advocates who are doing great work trying to solve these very critical issues in the midst of our crisis. And as we know, the climate crisis and all the other crises that we're facing, the intersection and the nexus between them seems to be sharpening more and more as each month goes by. So it's really, we talk about community resilience being, you know, this wide umbrella and very wide scope of specific topics that are within it. I think community development is even wider umbrella in which community resilience is a critical piece of. And so these intersections are very important. So thank you all again for bearing with us. I know it's been a good chunk of your afternoon and you've stuck around, so kudos to you. We very much appreciate your attendance and engagement. And not to say that we want you to disappear yet. If you have more time that you can spare, we would love for you to continue partaking with us in group discussion to kind of reflect on everything that's been shared from our great panel of speakers. Think about your own experience and personally and that which you have professionally. And we want to just kind of have an opportunity to hear from you all. What are the pressing issues that come to mind that we didn't cover today? Again, knowing that that community resilience umbrella is very wide and the scope of topics within is far reaching. You know, what else should be on the table? What should we be advocating for more fiercely? What do you foresee on the horizon that maybe hasn't quite come into clear focus yet that we definitely should start corralling more attention behind? So I just want to sort of preface it with those questions to get you thinking. I hope that all of you are able to join us on camera if you are able to. No pressure, of course. This is for sure a safe space, but if you are able to join us, come off camera to make it more of an interactive, you know, in a different reality where COVID was no more, we would definitely be doing this in person. So we want that human touch if possible. And many of us are amongst friends and or colleagues. So there's lots of familiar faces and names in the room. Hopefully you've had your afternoon cafecito, you enjoyed a nice lunch and you haven't been stuck behind your computer all day, but want to open it up to see reactions and thoughts on today's presentation. And I'll be kind and not pick on anyone, but it would be great to have volunteers speak up. You can either raise your hand or you can drop it in the chat, however you feel comfortable.
May I, I'm just going to speak up. So I guess the one topic that I think, you know, we're in storms, you know, we're in the middle of hurricane season, and low-income households often have to, you know, you're supposed to have I believe it's 3 days of food supplies, and it often becomes a choice between getting ready with those supplies and paying rent, or, you know, often, you know, people's work gets interrupted as well, and small businesses get disrupted. So I always think that there needs to be some kind of, I don't know, because it's really like some kind of match savings program or something to help people to just, you know, build that cushion. I mean, especially now with inflation being what it is. So I don't know that that's a question, but it's, you know, a comment.
Yeah, that's well received. I appreciate it. Natalia, I see your hand.
As a community-based organization, I will caveat this by saying it's at a small scale, but Catalyst Miami does have a disaster savings match program. It's dependent on, you know, what resources we have at the time, and it's not in my direct control. It's actually on the other side of our organization. We even have some staff at Catalyst that provide direct financial coaching services. So if you're interested in that, I'd be happy to get more information.
Santra was piloting it. So it just would be, yeah, we need something like that at scale, and I don't know how, because it's really hard to fundraise for matches for those things. But yeah.
Yeah, it's challenging, but it's impactful, and it's like it's like a little bit of an accountability buddy for somebody to be able to do that.
Yeah,
absolutely. Thanks for sharing that and uplifting it. And we know Sandra's doing really great work throwing down over at leading MWC now. So I'm sure that's definitely a topic she's still very much interested. Joanne, welcome. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, May, and pleasure to be here with everyone. So I have like a couple comments based on my take of the presentation so far. So I would say, we find ourselves in the situation where we have to deal with the now, and then we have to figure out what do we need to put in place for the future. So I'll start with the future. So when we look at what is being pushed for on the legislative side, in terms of engagement, who we're bringing in this space to not only identify what our priorities should be and how do we strategize to push the agenda forward, do we have everyone that needs to be part of the conversation? If not, who are those other stakeholders that we should bring to the table? The second item is, when we talk about the impact of climate, when we talk about hurricane season, I would say we're moving away from dealing with single disasters and now dealing with concurrent disasters. And when we talk about preparedness and response, what it means in the traditional sense of hurricane preparedness is not what it means for communities who are already struggling, not only from a financial standpoint, but also from a housing security, food security, and energy. So how do we empower or bring to the table the local knowledge from those communities to know how do we revamp or address other ways of getting prepared for disasters and not solely focusing on the traditional sense of disaster preparedness. And my last point is sustainability. So I think it is great. We have organizations such as those on this call today that have been a great player and a great champion in helping communities when dealing with disasters. But how do we make this, I don't know if I should call it cycle, but how do we turn this into a sustainable effort so that we're not always finding ourselves struggling or rushing to identify resources, whether it be from a financial standpoint or manpower, so that whenever we're dealing with disasters, it's a recurring cycle where all key players are coming together. And when I say key players, I'm not solely talking about the private sector or the public sector, but also community leaders who know what's happening in their block and who can inform us in, improving the way how we address getting ready or responding or mitigating disasters. That's all I have.
Thanks so much, Joanne. I think the world of you. You're absolutely one of the most brilliant people I know in my personal circle. So thank you for bringing those things up. To address the first bit, I absolutely agree. Who's in the room and who's connected and who's uplifting is very core and central to ensuring that we center equity and trusting lived experiences as we try to, brainstorm solutions and pass policies. As for this particular space, this is our coalition roundtable. We typically host them for coalition members exclusively, but for this quarter, we wanted to open it up to the general public so that partners and allies could join in and have an opportunity to chime in their thoughts and share their expertise and their perspectives as residents and movers and shakers in our community at all levels. So we appreciate all of you for being here, and hopefully we'll continue to engaging lively discussion. And I saw someone else's hand, but now it's gone. So feel free to speak up. I don't see your hand anymore. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. Joanne, you had some very great points, and I want to speak to the second one. And I'm not going to get everything verbatim, but essentially, how are we creating we talked about resilience being a broad term, right? And I think a lot of resilience relies on being able to support individual resilience, especially financial stability. And when we look at the climate action strategy, and please correct me if my quote's wrong, but approaches 1, 2, 4, 5, and 7 all list job creation as a co-benefit of those approaches. And so as we're moving forward in this strategy, we need to make sure that we're placing frontline communities, at risk, marginalized communities at the forefront of being able to have the education, whether that's through certification or whatever have you, put them in places that are primed to be able to benefit from this just transition. Well, not benefit from the just transition, make it a just transition. And I think that is how we start to answer those questions that even came before you, Joanne, about, I think it was Valeria about the matching, and Natalia also talked about matching for these resilience efforts, but being able to have that sustainability, right? So it's not just one event that they're recovering from, but it's a lifetime that they're able to, be able to provide for themselves in that manner. And then I think the second thing that comes to mind as this conversation is being opened up, I think the second thing that's coming to mind, we talk about adaptation, we talk about mitigation and the need for, we listen to and their mapping, and a lot of different efforts are mapping and collecting data. And I think there's a space to collect data because there's some truths that we already know. It's hot, right? And being able to still move in a solution-oriented manner prior to policy. It's great to have those policy changes, but there's certain things that we can do in the meantime to meet these needs that can come before policy or et cetera. So yes, mapping the data, but also like mapping solutions and taking those actionable steps.
Chiming in on that, I just spoke to Paul from PACT, and the issue that they've chosen to focus on is the tree canopy, right? So, and they've been like amazing advocates for affordable housing. So,
that's a very good point. Thanks for bringing that up, Val. Would love to welcome PACT into this space at our next convening for sure. And Neshma, I think I said that correct. Thank you for bringing up those points. I think they're very well taken, and I completely and emphatically agree, which is why precisely for us as SFCDC, our intention is always to look at the intersectionality of these issues. We previously held our housing affordability roundtable, like I mentioned at the top of the call, and then earlier in June, we held our economic policy roundtable looking at economic mobility and stability. And so this one that we're hosting today, our resiliency, our hope and intention is to see all of the priorities from those 3 roundtables and combine them for a comprehensive advocacy agenda that addresses both short and long term. As a policy advocacy coalition, we called it a policy roundtable with the intent that these priorities emerge, and hopefully they turn into, or they equate to addressing systemic interventions of dismantling those policies that are creating and sustaining and perpetuating the inequities, while simultaneously trying to amplify and build the better, more inclusive, sustainable policies and solutions that will create a different future that I think we all want to see. So I appreciate you bringing up that point, because it really layers into the heart of what SFCDC aspires to dive into, which is why, again, in today's call, having the diversity of perspectives from the technology tools that we have accessible to our academic folks, what are they digging into? our Transit Alliance, from that perspective, what do they have going on? We had previously invited a few other speakers to join us as well, including, for example, the Miami Foundation that just got their Resilience Fund. Unfortunately, they weren't able to join us, but send their regards and remain a close partner and ally of ours. And so, our ecosystem is very wide. I think there's a lot of folks doing great work. And what we aspire to do is help map out those solutions, right? How do we get those, siloed projects more connected so that way we can identify how to stream more fluidly across the near and now emergency that folks are experiencing, especially on the front lines. I know I said a lot, so Glennie, I see your hand.
Hi, I joined this call. I used to live in Miami. I no longer live in Miami. I live in New York City now. Made the leap over to the dark side in corporate America, but I would like to go back to Miami at some point, sooner, South Florida. So when I saw this, I'm like, I definitely want to learn more about what's going on. I used to actually work for the Children's Trust while I lived in Miami, at least as my last role. But something that comes up for me as I listen to these things, and not only on this call, but even at home, right? Because at the end of the day, we're a collective of individuals. Like, yes, we have these forums, we have some people that step up on leadership roles, right? Such as to have these conversations, bring them up, advocate, etc. But there is power in the collective and the people. So even just having a conversation with my mom and trying to bring, shed some light on some of this information, it's kind of hard for her to grasp. So it brings me to how do we bring this information, not just to these forums, but to the adults, right? And not just the kids, because they're learning about some of these things in school, but to the general public in a way that's easy to digest, right? How do we bring these to certain events, to certain forums in a way that we can really drive the message that we're not just being impacted, right? Like marginalized communities are not just being impacted, like they're impacting, right? And we can impact in other ways, right? It could be through advocacy. It could be through changes in habit, right? It could be through how we consume. It could be through many different ways, right? There's that empowerment aspect through education, and thinking of how we learn, right? We can't bring necessarily formal education 100% because it won't necessarily always drive the message. We have to really think of our audience, but there's a really big opportunity to how we can get creative to bringing that education down to the community of something like climate change. It's not just like, oh, my street is flooding, and you're thinking of, I can't go down the street because it's flooded, and the inconvenience for me is, what does this actually mean, right? How does it keep impacting me, and how am I impacting it, right? What am I doing? What can I do? Otherwise I'm going to be screwed for a few years or not longer, right? And my kids, and so on and so forth. And there is what I've been, just looking at, even work, like I said, bringing it back home, right? To dealing with my parents. Let's keep it at that level. How have I had to kind of change my way of communicating so that I can drive certain messages, and just really bringing it back to just our general community, where we stand, the level of educations that we have, and how can we have conversations, because we need to empower. It's, unfortunately, it's always the few that take those leadership roles, like in these organizations, and to advocate. But we have so many challenges because we need more masses, right? So yeah, just bringing that is just a thought that came up, and just trying to drive awareness sometimes. And even within my family, I struggle, and I'm like, I can only imagine what it is at a greater scale. But then I see some small wins, and it just came from changing like how I worded something or whatnot. So just how do we bring that back to our people?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing that point, and we welcome you with open arms anytime you're ready to come back to South Florida, because we need folks who get it to join the ranks and help do this important work. I will say, one of the other folks that was supposed to join the call as a presenter that unfortunately wasn't able to is a former colleague of mine and Joanne's, Mackenzie, who is going to speak about climate justice and about popular education and the role of that in all of this, because I completely agree with what you said. You know, we can only get so far if we keep focusing everything at the grass tops level of people who are already well connected, people who are already plugged in and trying to advocate. It's about bringing more folks into our ranks, which is why I talk about lived experience so much. I think, you know, we have professionals who do the research and are, you know, well experienced academically and otherwise, and thank God for that. It's very needed. But equally, we really do need the voice of the people, of, you know, the everyday mom and dad or single person, or whomever that's living in our community and suffering in all these conditions. And so we want to not only represent them, but hear from them directly. And for SFCDC, although we do not provide direct services per se, and although we don't have that grassroots reach, many of our members in the coalition do. For example, the Miami Climate Alliance, Catalyst Miami, I'm thinking Florida Rising, et cetera. And so the Miami Worker Center, all of them are doing incredible work in their respective lanes. And we want to be able to help bridge that gap from the grassroots organizers to the technocrats who are working out, you know, the nuts and bolts of the policies and how the capital is moving and the technology that's helping facilitate all of that. So we really want to be that platform across both audiences, because we need the widest table possible to get the results that we want. It's a lot of work, and so we need everybody we can get to roll up their sleeves and partake. So that said, are there any other thoughts that you all would like to uplift? I know several have had to pop off and we're already at that 2-hour mark, so I don't want to belabor the topic, but I think there's so much that we could cover when we talk about resilience and when we talk about all of the many priorities that we need to address. But I do want to say that SFCDC, for those of you who are current members, feel free to let Sam or myself know of the different projects and activities you have going on. Again, we want to be that platform to help uplift it and amplify it across not only our members, but the broader ecosystem. But then also, if you have other ideas that come up, you know, when you're thinking about it over dinner, or you're talking to your partner, or you're watching TV and something on the news grabs your attention and you're like, hey, why isn't anybody addressing that? We would love to be that platform to share the united voice, a united vision with united values. So we encourage you to continue engaging with us, sharing your ideas, sharing your recommendations and solutions, so we can push for that collective action we've been talking about. So any other final thoughts? If you want to raise your hand or just come off mute. I know many of you are very brilliant and probably quite pensive as well. So if you're shy and want to keep it to yourself, that's fine, but it's a safe space if you want to voice it here and now before we transition to the rest of the evening.
If I may, I always like saying that. Everyone, I did drop a link in the chat. There is a survey we'd love for you to take before you leave us this evening. And one thing that's not really worked into the survey as a set question, but I really think it's important that you all look at how we continue these conversations. As May said, we do these quarterly, so it would probably be late August or early September before we reconvene. As I think a big question to look at is, you know, how do we create a response to the resilience challenges that we've been presented with today? You know, there's a huge umbrella of different issues that all fall under that sort of rubric, that heading of resiliency challenges. So how do we, and I heard several folks speak about the need for collective action, which was music to our ears at SFCDC, since we are all about that. We are about looking at collective solutions to the challenges that we face in moving a comprehensive community agenda. So in that survey, if you would, let us know, what would you like to see at the next roundtable where we really start to process a lot of the information that was presented today from our very stellar panel of presenters. So if you would do that simple thing, look at how do we continue this conversation include that in your responses to the survey. I think there is a very wide open question at the end of the survey, which is pretty short. That would certainly be appreciated. I think that does facilitate for us as the conveners of these roundtables, what the next roundtable session looks like.
Thanks so much, Sam. I really appreciate that. And, it was mentioned more than once that there's people that we want in this space that currently aren't. And so we encourage you to, help us cast a wide net. We want to be sort of that backbone in the ecosystem to help bring all of the different players to the table, as mentioned, grassroots, grass tops, public, private, nonprofit. If you are a community advocate, we want to engage with you. We want to work together as we drive consensus to hopefully not only do systemic interventions, but improve the quality of life for all of us here in South Florida. So please do share those recommendations. If you aren't a member, go ahead and join. I see Diana has a question about anyone in this group interested in getting involved in state and Fed initiatives or climate adaptation. I think I would say yes on behalf of everyone here in sort of a general blanket. But if you want to come off mute and share more, you're more than welcome to, Diane. Or if you want to drop resources in the chat, you can do that too. We'll be sure to send it out to everyone after the call.
Yeah. It's a heavy duty topic and I know we're near the end of the call, so I'm not gonna, but I do think that, perhaps the future meeting, we can concentrate on this. And I would like it to be from a bottoms up approach. And I say this with a lot of love to Jim, because I definitely know that the county is very involved with the water management district and other players. My concern is that the voices that are closest to the front lines, the marginalized communities, are not in these conversations and don't even really have a clear idea of what it is that our federal and state partners are doing. And some of them have deadlines coming up like in a few weeks. On my end, I'm trying to find ways to see how I force the agencies to listen, because their typical public participation process is failing.
Yeah, it leaves a lot to be desired. I can agree with you there. And, we typically in most of our roundtables, we have a national, county, and then local level. Unfortunately, some of the folks that we invited to offer more of that perspective weren't able to join us today, with vacation season in full effect. A lot of folks are out and about, and obviously COVID is making its round, unfortunately. But I absolutely agree, especially when it comes to those resources. 90% of the time it's coming either from private funding or, federal resources that we need to be able to tap into. And we need to, voice our thoughts on how those resources should be disseminated, much to the point that Natalia made earlier about the 10 million, at the state level that the governor is using for that state guard. Are there other ways that we could be better use those resources, that $10 million? So I emphatically agree and look forward to partnering and supporting in any way we can. Megan, I see your hand.
I just had a quick question. Is there a topical focus area for the next one? Or was that like your question, Sam, like you wanted to know from us what that should be?
Well, I think, to answer your question directly, Megan, the agenda for the next roundtable, late August, early September, is to really look at what was presented today and start to come up with actionable solutions that can be done on a collective basis. What do we look at in terms of a policy advocacy position? What do we look at in terms of potentially putting together collective action that looks at things at a very grassroots level? It could be something as simple as this group. The attendees in this roundtable are going to look to support what PACT is doing in terms of trying to increase tree canopy. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank
you.
you.
Any feedback is appreciated.
And I'll take that a step further as well. We do these quarterly for the 3 focal areas that I've mentioned, housing, economic, and resiliency. And the idea is that each time it comes back around in that in-between time, we're adding research, we're adding more partners, and kind of digging in to laser down a little bit more comprehensively, so that we can pinpoint a really solid advocacy agenda that's actionable, that's impactful, and that is as inclusive as possible. Say that 3 times fast. So Jim, please go ahead. Oh, you are on mute.
You're on mute, Jim. Yeah, am I on mute there?
There you go.
I just, Diana triggered it in my mind. We are coming up on a key set of elections.
Yes.
And so my statement is not about who to vote for, where to vote, what vote, but vote. We just been through redistricting that happens every 10 years. I used to be in District 112. I find out I'm now in District 113. That's happening everywhere. And we're about to elect the next set of leaders for the next 10 years. So these issues need to be in the electoral process for discussions. I hope we can all personally, individually, but I'm not speaking for the county, but I just feel that's really important. Thanks.
Absolutely. I love that that came up. In fact, SFCDC is partnering with Catalyst Miami and several others to do an engagement fair later on this year, where we will be doing some GeoTV, as well as sharing opportunities at the county level of different boards and trustees and roles that people can plug into to kind of elevate and take their advocacy a step further on a more abiding sort of level. I think by and largely SFCDC, you'll often hear me say, at the end of the day, community development should start with community. And in order for that to be possible, we need deep and abiding engagement at all levels. And so whether that's with your voice or with your vote or all of the in between, we definitely want to promote the more than just showing up, more than just checking a box, but staying present and staying engaged. So thank you for bringing that up. Any other thoughts from friends or allies before we give you some time back?
Just real quick, I just wanted to acknowledge the comment about mapping the issue and trying to move that towards mapping solutions. It's definitely like a I don't want to say criticism, but whatever, it's fine. Be critical of what we do, please.
Oh no,
that's how we get better.
that wasn't the intention. I'm sorry, Megan.
No, it's okay.
No, that wasn't the intention.
I think that's important. Yes, having an understanding of the problem before we can address it is also important. But that's something we've heard from our stakeholder group, and I encourage you to engage with us more, or we can talk about more what that looks like, because I hear you loud and clear, and that's exactly what I want to for the work we're doing.
Absolutely, Megan. I look forward to connecting. I'll be at the housing summit, so I hope to see
I'll be there too. Yeah,
and,
cool.
I think it was more, this room, and I'll keep it short, May. I think this room, we've been in those spaces, and we're hearing of all the data collection and analyses and evaluation. I think I don't want to speak for the whole group, but I'm sure that many individuals can say that they've been to many, many, many things. And it wasn't directed at Cleo, we partner with you. I was on the extreme heat. And so it was more of a general statement of how do we move from the conversation to the movement. And so I think it was more of a charge on all of us and all of the great work that we're doing, because I think one thing I can say is that we all want to see these changes happening, and we want to see them sooner rather than later. So don't avoid me at the housing summit. I can't wait to meet you.
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay.
Yeah, and I didn't take it any kind of way. I just I've been working at universities for a long time, so I feel like we're in our ivory tower, and it turns into a lot of hand waving sometimes, and I think we need to be like, wait a minute. let's make this an actionable thing, you know, that's
Yeah.
important. And I think we need to have that in mind always.
Yes. So definitely, Nishma, if you want to come to the workshop, any of the ones that we listed, we'll be sure to get an invite to all of you to learn more about CAMP and the next iteration of how we can continue making that tool more actionable and help facilitate this work and not just look at numbers and graphs and very worrisome pictures. Awesome. Well, I know many others of you who are on the call will likely send me emails of great ideas. I know many of you, as mentioned, are very brilliant and send us emails all the time saying, this is the laundry list of things I want to see done. And so hopefully we can't promise we'll get to all of it, but little by little, we want to definitely chip away and prioritize the things that are going to make the most impact and help the most vulnerable among us for sure. So much appreciated for your time, for your engagement, your attention. I hope you all found this to be an inspiring and helpful space, and we hope that you will join us next time. Again, if you are not a member, please be sure to be a member because in Q3, the Coalition Roundtables will be for members only. So we want to continue the dialogue and we want you to be a part of that. And the perks are we're half off right now because it is prorated for the year. So dues are not that bad. And if you need to waive the dues for any reasons, for hardship, for whatever, shoot me or Sam an email. We'll be happy to have a one-on-one discussion because by no means do we intend for it to be exclusive. We just want to make sure that people are vested in what we're trying to build together as a coalition. So take the survey. I will send out the recording and all of the PowerPoints in a recap email shortly, definitely before end of week. But in the meantime, take care, folks. Don't let COVID catch you.
Thank you, everyone.
Stay safe.